The old Ford Ranger, which Ben had long ago affectionately, or perhaps prophetically, named the Mule, finally died with a grateful shuddering clunk as Anya cut the ignition. It was not a mechanical failure, but a voluntary surrender, a final acknowledgement that its journey had reached the end of the line. They were parked at the bitter end of a barely visible logging trail, the kind of forgotten, overgrown path where an official map would simply declare in stark white text, "Unsurveyed." The atmosphere immediately pressed in on them. The air was thick and heavy, like breathing lukewarm soup, tasting of wet, decaying earth, the sharp, fermenting scent of pine needles, and the cloying, sickly sweet perfume of honeysuckle vines that fought a losing battle with the metallic, stagnant tang of swamp gas. It was a sensory assault. The sun above, when they dared look up, was a bruised, hazy yellow, filtering through a canopy so dense it felt like twilight had descended 3 hours early, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The quiet here was not the peaceful silence of a nature hike. It was a smothering weight. It felt as though every living thing in the vast green heart of the swamp was collectively holding its breath, waiting. Anya immediately checked her watch, a rugged, expensive piece of gear, comparing the blinking GPS coordinates to the printed topographic map she'd pinned to the sun visor. "Okay, last chance to turn back," she said, her voice sharp and professional, cutting through the unnatural quiet. "I'm calling this grid Alpha 7. We're a solid 5 miles from the nearest paved road. You packed the water filter, right, Ben?" Anya's need for certainty was her first line of defense, a controlling ritual against the chaos of the environment. Ben, already wrestling his oversized olive-drab pack out of the truck bed, didn't even look at her, a wide, slightly manic grin already spread across his face. "Relax, Commander." Packed the filter, packed the iodine, packed the emergency stash of peanut butter cups. "We're good." He slung the 70-pound pack onto his shoulders, wincing a little at the sudden strain. "Besides, we have to go through with it," he insisted, his voice already too loud for the stillness. "This is where the old man disappeared. We've come too far to back out now." Chloe, ever the observant outsider, was already several feet away, standing by an enormous, moss-covered oak tree that looked older than the state itself. She hadn't even bothered to open the truck's trunk yet. She wore a wide-brimmed sun hat, and her sketchbook was already out, though she wasn't sketching the view. Instead, she was tracing the outline of the tree trunk with her finger, feeling its texture, as if seeking a story in the bark. He didn't disappear, Ben. The records show he just walked away from his land, officially abandoning his claim. "That's the official story, sure," Ben countered, his voice booming slightly in the unnatural silence. "But the local legend says he was taken by the Green Man, a creature of the swamp that collects souls. Imagine the history. This is a nexus point of fear and folklore, Anya. It's fantastic." His constant use of humor and historical reference was a transparent shield, a deliberate attempt to intellectualize the mounting apprehension. "It's humid and likely full of ticks," Anya muttered, adjusting the heavy leather belt that held her tools. She couldn't resist quickly running through Ben's packing list one more time, confirming the bear spray was accessible, a minor controlling act she simply couldn't resist. Chloe turned back to them, her eyes wide, missing Ben's historical thrill entirely. "Anya, you're missing the point," she said, her voice dropping to an almost reverent whisper. "It's not the history that's heavy. It's the silence. It feels intentional, like the air itself is listening to our every word." Anya scoffed, pulling out her compact folding shovel and rock hammer, her tools of logic. "That's called atmospheric pressure, Chloe. Or maybe you're just experiencing the deep woods creeps you read about in those old naturalist books." They set up camp in a small, slightly elevated clearing, Anya was meticulous to a fault. The tents were zipped perfectly, food was hung high on a rope between two oaks, and the fire pit was ringed with stones in a perfect circle. By 10 p.m., the fire was down to embers, casting dancing, nervous shadows. They were talking about mundane college plans, trying to anchor themselves in the familiar when it happened. "Anyone else hear that?" Ben whispered, his easy, joking confidence instantly gone, his voice tight with sudden, unmasked fear. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a crackle or a snap of breaking wood. It was a high-pitched harmonic thrum, vibrating somewhere in the deep, ultrasonic range. It felt less like a sound traveling through the air and more like a resonance beginning deep within their chests. "Sounds like a distant freight train idling," Anya said, trying to force a logical explanation onto the sound, desperately clinging to the known. "Or maybe an electrical tower. We're near the border of that nature preserve, remember?" Chloe, however, was already sitting fully up, staring out into the absolute darkness beyond the meager campfire light. "No, Anya. Trains don't vibrate like that. It sounds like a single massive string being pulled, vibrating forever. And it's getting closer." They listened, trapped by the terrifying ambiguity of the sound, until 10 long minutes later, the thrum suddenly cut out. It left behind a ringing, profound silence that felt infinitely louder and more threatening than the sound itself. They rationalized it, a weird acoustic trick, maybe an unknown geological tremor, packed their anxieties down like dirt, and finally, uneasily, drifted to sleep. The morning was a sickly pale yellow, the hazy sunlight struggling to penetrate the oppressive canopy. The previous night's tension had not fully dissipated. It had merely been filed away, waiting for a prompt. Anya was already up, adjusting the rainfly on her tent, meticulously restoring the order she craved. Ben, usually the first one up, chirping about the joys of instant coffee and the next historical footnote, was unusually quiet, rubbing his temples with slow, deliberate circles. "Headache?" Anya asked, passing him a mug of lukewarm, weak coffee. "Worse," Ben mumbled, taking a slow sip. "It feels like someone tried to rewind my brain with a fork." "Did you guys hear anything else after that weird hum finally cut out?" "Just Ben's snoring, and that was plenty mechanical for the whole swamp," Chloe quipped, though her smile was weak and didn't reach her eyes. She was already drawing in her sketchbook, but instead of the majestic cypress trees, the page was filled with a series of abstract, vibrating lines, a visual transcription of the sound from the night before. The discovery of the equipment malfunction immediately fractured their already fragile morning calm. Ben held up the small, high-end trail camera they'd positioned on the truck. "See? Total blackout. No power, no settings, nothing. And look," he popped open the battery door. "These are brand new lithiums, fully charged yesterday, fresh out of the pack. Now they're stone cold dead. It's not just low on power, Anya. It's like something aggressively sucked the life out of the circuitry itself." Anya took the camera, her brow furrowed with disbelief, inspecting the terminals. "That's impossible. A short circuit. No, the battery housing isn't even warm. Okay, fine. Maybe we got a bad batch of batteries, Ben. It happens. Don't spiral." "Don't spiral?" "Anya, your default setting is denial," Ben snapped, his usual jokes replaced by sharp, defensive irritability. He took the camera back and shoved it into his pack. "Listen, I'm a history major. I know a pattern when I see one. Weird noise at night, tech failure in the morning. That's a prelude to something, not a coincidence." "It's a coincidence," Anya insisted, tossing a dead battery into a small Ziploc bag for later analysis. "I'm a geology student. I deal with electrical currents and magnetic fields every day. Maybe there's a localized magnetic anomaly here, a small subterranean pocket of magnetite throwing off the battery current. Her need for a hard, scientific answer was intense. Chloe set her sketchbook down, her eyes calm and unsettlingly insightful. It was the sound, Anya. The sound wasn't mechanical, and it wasn't magnetic. It was clean, like a tuning fork struck in a sterile room. It felt less like a sound wave and more like a precise, invisible command. And my own equipment is off, too. Anya stared at her, confused. What are you talking about? Your charcoal? No, my field sensor, Chloe clarified, picking up a small, palm-sized electronic device. I brought my seismic sensors to log soil compaction for my art project. They're registering random massive spikes, off the charts, then immediately nothing. It's like the earth beneath us is having a seizure. If it were a logical anomaly, like your magnetite, my readings would be consistent. These are anything but. The admission was painful for Anya, forcing her to confront evidence that fell outside her comfort zone of hard science and quantifiable facts. The tension hung in the air, thick, physical, and undeniable. They decided to take a short hike to a remote bluff to gain cell service and check the weather, rationalizing they just needed to clear their heads and get perspective. 3 miles in a patch of deep, undisturbed cedar thicket, they found it. A perfect geometric scar, a circle roughly 30 feet in diameter, where every living thing, the moss, the ferns, the thick cedar scrub, had been turned into blackened, crunchy ash. The center was a deeper, vitreous black, like melted obsidian. There were no paths leading in, no broken branches, no signs of a liquid accelerant. Anya dropped to her knees, running a gloved hand over the edge of the circle. It's instantaneous. Whatever did this, it didn't burn the ground. It sterilized it. There's no smoke damage to the surrounding leaves. Ben, this isn't a forest fire. The surrounding life is completely intact right up to the line. No, Ben whispered, the historian's interest overriding his mounting fear for a brief, clinical moment. It's too clean, too perfect. It looks like a landing scar, a signature, a specific point of entry. They knew, without having to say the word alien, that they were no longer dealing with any known natural phenomenon. They were back at camp, the image of the cold, silent, perfectly circular burn scar, now a permanent, anchor-like fixture in their minds. The fire they built was too small, the shadows it cast too large and menacing. They had passed beyond simple apprehension and into a profound, shared dread. We should leave now, Ben said, staring into the flickering embers, hugging his knees to his chest. His voice was trembling, the fear finally winning. Pack everything and hike out under the moon. We can still make it to the truck. We can't, Anya replied, her voice firm and desperately trying to project authority, but her hands were constantly gripping and ungripping the hilt of the large hunting knife she'd set beside her. We'd get lost in this swamp in the dark, Ben. We don't have enough water to navigate 5 miles of unmarked trail at night. Panic is exactly what gets people killed in the woods. I'm not talking about getting lost in the woods, Anya. I'm talking about getting collected. Ben looked up, his eyes wide and dark in the firelight. I've always been afraid of the dark, you know? Not of what I can't see, but of the sudden, total absence of light. It means you're out of options, like drowning in air. Anya looked away, staring into the impenetrable darkness, a darkness that now contained something that defied all her equations. I don't feel safe unless I have an answer, a formula, a logical pathway out. Right now I have nothing, and that is a worse kind of dark for me. The conversation died with the crackle of a pine knot. Then the air began to change. A subtle electric charge built up, causing the fine hairs on their arms to stand on end. The crackling sound of the campfire itself seemed to dull, as if a volume dial had been slowly turned down. The light didn't filter down from above. It cut through the dense canopy like a single, perfect, sterile beam. It was a color that didn't exist in their normal spectrum, a cool, vibrating indigo. The light pulsed once, and the energy field around them intensified. Their skin felt tight and cold, and a low, resonant hum, a complex, layered version of the one from the first night, returned, vibrating the water in their half-filled canteens. Anya immediately went into full command mode. She didn't panic. She became purely reactive and tactical. Knife. Ben grabbed the satellite phone and the shovel. Chloe, your pack, now. We run opposite the light. Her analytical mind found a singular focus, immediate movement and survival. Ben, in contrast, was frozen. His jaw was locked, his breathing shallow. He was experiencing the crushing, debilitating fear he'd only ever joked about. Chloe's reaction was the most telling. While her face was pale with terror, her eyes were transfixed by the impossible indigo glow. She whispered, "It's beautiful. It's truly outside of everything. I knew it. I knew it wasn't a trick of the light." The light shifted, becoming less a focused beam and more a soft, enveloping aura. And then, at the very edge of the dwindling firelight, they saw the figure. It was tall and impossibly thin, moving with a fluid, gliding gait that seemed to ignore gravity and the uneven ground. Its outline was sharp and distinct against the indigo glow. There were no discernible features, just the chilling sense of a head and limbs, moving with a terrible, inhuman grace. "Move! Ben, move!" Anya shouted, her voice thick with pure desperation. They left the fire, the tents, and all the evidence of their rational human world behind, sprinting blindly into the total darkness of the opposite woods. The impossible, silent indigo light had become their new, terrifying North Star. The last thing they heard before the sound was swallowed by the dense swamp was the metallic, silent thud of the entity taking one single step onto their abandoned campsite. The woods at night were no longer just dark. They were a black, swallowing void that pressed against their eyeballs. The urgent, panicked dialogue was punctuated by the rhythmic shoo-shoo of their feet slipping on damp earth and the jarring thud of tripping over gnarled roots. Anya was leading, holding the small flashlight low to avoid silhouetting them against the brush, her entire focus narrowed to the tiny circle of light. "Left here. No, wait. Did the moss grow on that side or this side?" Anya gasped, her breath coming in ragged, painful tears. Her certainty, the very trait they relied on, was fading with every stumbling step, turning navigation into a frantic guessing game. Ben was directly behind her, dragging his feet and panting like a winded dog. "Moss grows north, except when it's near water or if it's been burned off by a thing." He sounded close to tears, the high-pitched anxiety of a historian suddenly confronting a truly unknowable future. "Anya, slow down, please. I can't breathe." My chest, it feels like I swallowed a rock. "We can't slow down. It's behind us," Anya snapped, her voice thin with desperation. "You should have kept up, Ben. You know we can't stop yet." "My pack strap broke when I tripped over that log," Ben shouted back, his voice cracking with a high, hysterical edge. "I told you." "I lost the compass in the mud, and I think I lost the first aid kit entirely." Ben's confession about the lost emergency gear was the trigger that finally shattered Anya's control. She spun around, her flashlight beam catching her face, furious, strained, and stained with mud. Her rigid planning had failed, and she immediately transferred her panic into furious, bitter blame. "You lost it." "Ben, you had one job," Anya hissed, the words tasting like metal. "One job, and it was to secure the emergency supplies. That kit had the water purification tabs, and my satellite phone charger. Are you even trying to stay functional, or are you just giving up?" "I am trying." "You think this is a joke?" Ben retorted, his fear transforming into reckless, protective anger. I'm terrified, Anya. My hands are shaking so bad I can barely hold the canteen. Not everyone deals with terror by becoming a drill sergeant and shouting everyone else into line. He stepped closer, planting his feet in the mud. You think your control is helping us? You're dragging us in circles because you won't admit you're hopelessly lost. The fight ground them to a standstill, the raw, ugly sound of their antagonism deafening in the swamp. Chloe stepped between them, her presence demanding attention. Her voice was calm but penetrating, forcing both of them to look at her, truly see her. Chloe was the first to realize the psychological nature of their pursuit. Stop, both of you. Listen to yourselves, she instructed, her voice steady. This, the shouting, the panic, the mistakes, this is exactly what it wants. What are you talking about, Chloe? Anya demanded, wiping a stinging streak of sweat from her eyes. Think about it. Why didn't it attack us at the camp? It watched us run. It herded us, Chloe explained, the horrifying logic settling over them. It's not chasing our bodies, it's hunting our coherence. It's studying how we break down. If we collapse into fear and hatred, we stop being a threat. We stop being people and become predictable, irrational animals. Chloe's intervention was just enough to restore a sliver of tactical thought. They started moving again, Anya now forcing herself to trust Chloe's intuition about the best direction, away from the listening quiet, toward the sound of a distant, rushing creek. After another miserable hour of stumbling through thickets, Chloe spotted a small, overgrown cleft in a rock face, a shallow, waterlogged cave, almost completely hidden by hanging kudzu vines that formed a green, suffocating curtain. They squeezed inside, collapsing onto the cold, muddy stone floor. The confined space was suffocating, but the kudzu provided a camouflage barrier they desperately needed. It'll have to come straight in here, Anya whispered, clutching her knife, her eyes wide as she stared at the gap. Or it'll just... Wait, Ben said, his breath evening out now that they were stationary. He held up a nearly empty canteen, turning it upside down to prove its uselessness. We have maybe half a liter of drinking water left between us, and the kit is gone. Anya, we're not just lost. We're on a clock. The realization hung between them, a cold, undeniable weight. They were trapped, mostly defenseless, and dying of thirst, 5 miles deep in the South's hostile green heart, waiting for their captor to collect them. Trapped in the miserable, damp cave, they had nowhere left to run and no immediate threat, a terrifying combination that forced an agonizing internal shift. The conversation moved from tactical whispers to deeply personal revelations as the cold imminence of death finally stripped away all their carefully constructed facades. The cave became a confessional. If we don't make it out of here, Ben began, his voice barely a rasp, dried out from terror and thirst, I need to tell you guys something completely ridiculous. I hate that I'm a history major. My dad calls me the king of obsolete facts because I can tell you the name of every general in the Civil War. But I wanted to do graphic design or maybe sculpture, but I couldn't bear the disappointment in his eyes. He let out a dry, rattling laugh. I always take the easy, funny path so nobody has to rely on me, because if they rely on me and I fail, it means I'm worthless. Anya stared at the damp cave wall, then sighed, a sound heavy with exhaustion. You think you're a failure? My entire life is a spreadsheet for my parents. I'm supposed to get the PhD, get the perfect environmental policy job, marry the perfect man. My pragmatism, my logic. It's just a way to build a wall so high that no one can ever tell me I got the equation wrong. I only feel safe when I have an answer. Right now, all I have are variables and terror, and that is a total failure. Chloe reached out and touched Anya's muddy sleeve, a gentle unifying gesture that cut through the fear and self-loathing. You're both terrified of failure, but for opposite reasons. Ben, you're afraid of disappointing others. Anya, you're afraid of disappointing yourself. That's why you're my best friends. You're both hiding the same fear. Chloe's voice softened then, filled with a strange, quiet wonder that seemed disconnected from their reality. I'm the one who sketches and paints all the time because I'm looking for something that is more real than reality. Something transcendent. That light last night, the figure, it was horrible, yes, but it was also the most beautiful, terrible freedom I've ever felt. She paused, her eyes glowing faintly in the gloom. It proved that everything we thought we knew about the universe, gravity, physics, life, is just a tiny, fragile little house we built to keep the dark out. And that dark is vast and terrifying, and finally, undeniably real. This intense, raw conversation defined their emotional core. Ben's humor was revealed to be a defensive mechanism, Anya's control, a shield against external judgment, and Chloe's sensitivity, not a weakness, but a profound, almost spiritual connection to the unknown. They stopped being just three campers and became three souls, facing mortality together. The conversation was violently interrupted. A sound began right outside their thin curtain of kudzu, not the resonant hum, but something new. It was a series of low, rhythmic clicks and sharp hisses, not the random sound of an insect or a reptile, but something clearly structured, repetitive, and definitely linguistic. "It's talking," Anya whispered, her breath catching in her throat, instantly abandoning her personal revelation for the clinical mystery. "It's not looking for us, it's communicating." "It sounds like a language without lungs," Ben murmured, his face a mixture of fear and the historical fascination he couldn't turn off. "Like a complex code, but organic, highly ordered." They listened for 10 minutes, the clicks forming intricate, complex patterns that suggested a vocabulary and grammar built on mathematics and silence. It was undeniably intelligent, discussing something, or them, in a tongue built on cold precision. The clicks ended abruptly and the silence returned, confirming the entity wasn't a blind predator, but an observer, a frighteningly intelligent one. "It knows we're here," Chloe stated, her voice unnaturally steady. "It just decided to let us listen to its report." They emerged from the miserable, damp cave at dawn, gaunt, muddied, but resolved. The immediate threat was gone, but the atmosphere felt heavy and surgical, as if the forest was waiting for their next move like a patiently set trap. Their conversation was now tight, functional, and infused with the terror of knowing they were constantly being studied. "Okay, new plan," Anya said, her voice gravelly from thirst. "The trail cameras are out, the phone is dead, and we have no water. We need elevation. The old fire tower on the ridge is 5 miles due north. If we can reach the top, maybe we can get a radio signal or at least a clear view to plan an exit." 5 miles without water is impossible," Ben countered, already shuffling on exhausted feet. "We'll die of heat stroke before we get halfway. We need to find the creek. It's the only option." "Staying here guarantees capture," Anya insisted, pushing her logic forward despite the impossible physical toll. "We move fast, stick to the deepest cover, and pray the tower has a radio that works." As they began their slow, agonizing trek toward the north, Chloe paused by an ancient, deeply scarred cypress tree. Embedded deep in the bark was a small, smooth, metallic object, perfectly spherical, radiating a faint, cool, silvery light that gave off no discernible heat. It was undeniably foreign. Anya approached it with the fervor of a scientist, momentarily reclaiming her agency. "Don't touch it, Chloe. It's some kind of device, a beacon or a tracker." She carefully chipped it out with her hunting knife, holding it up for analysis. The alloy isn't on the periodic table. It's almost weightless. This is proof. We can analyze this. We can fight back with knowledge. Ben recoiled, his paranoia a painful but rational response to their situation. Anya, put that down. It's a trap. Leave it. It's bait. It wants you to take it. Don't you remember every horror movie you ever watched? You don't pick up the weird alien glowing thing. Chloe ignored both of them. She reached out and lightly pressed her fingertip to the sphere, despite Anya's sharp warning. A gasp escaped her lips. Her eyes went blank, focused inward as if watching a terrifying internal movie. It's not a trap, Ben. It's a memory. Or a map, she whispered, pulling her hand back, shaking. I saw silent, immense structures, not cities, just cold, complex shapes, and a darkness that felt impossibly old. It's not angry, it's profoundly indifferent. The exposure had subtly changed her. She was gaining a terrifying psychic insight into the entity's nature. As they argued over the object, Anya insisting on keeping it, Ben demanding they abandon it, Chloe trying to explain its nature, they were forced off their chosen path by a sight in the distance. A newly fallen, massive pine tree, sliced cleanly and vertically in half, completely blocked the clearest, most direct route north. That tree was not here yesterday, Anya stated flatly, the metallic orb clutched tightly in her hand. The wood is fresh. The cut is surgical. Ben looked at his compass. The needle was spinning wildly, completely useless near the wreckage. It's not tracking us, Anya. It's hurting us. It knows we're going for the tower and it's cutting off our direct path. It's forcing us into a more difficult, predictable route, probably toward a pre-selected collection point. The horrifying logic settled over them like a shroud. They were not escapees. They were prey being funneled by a shepherd who knew the woods, and their desperation better than they did. Their immediate danger was not the distance to the tower, but the entity's patient, quiet control of their fate. They turned, defeated and utterly drained, and headed east toward a deep ravine, the only path left open to them. The journey to the fire tower was now an agonizing crawl through the steep, slippery banks of the ravine and up the unforgiving slope of the ridge. They moved with the shuffling, half-conscious gait of the severely dehydrated and exhausted. The conversation was reduced to strained, whispered fragments, reflecting their depletion and the constant, unseen pressure of being watched. "Just 100 more steps, Anya," Ben wheezed, wiping a streak of mud and sweat from his face with a trembling hand. "Then we rest. I have to." "We rest when the tower is in sight," Anya corrected, her voice brittle and strained. She still held the cold, silvery sphere tightly, its subtle presence a tangible connection to the thing that hunted them. "This ravine is too open. It's forcing us onto the high ground where we'll be easy to spot." "It doesn't matter where we go," Chloe murmured, her head low, conserving every breath. "The birds stopped singing 10 minutes ago. It's close. Maybe not physically, but acutely aware." The stress finally erupted over their dwindling water supply, a single canteen with barely a swallow left. Anya had been rationing it meticulously, and Ben, desperate and irrational, attempted to take a larger swig than agreed, his fear overriding his ethics. "Ben, what are you doing?" Anya screamed, grabbing the canteen and splashing a few precious drops onto the dry leaves. "That was my turn. I measured it. My throat is sandpaper, Anya. I need it more. I'm the biggest. I'm the most dehydrated. I'm going to pass out," Ben shouted, his voice cracking with hysterical exhaustion. The historian's anxiety had peaked into raw, selfish panic. He pulled the canteen away with brute force. "And I'm the one navigating. If I pass out, we're finished. Give me back the canteen." Anya wrestled him for the metal container, their struggle short, pathetic and brutal, ending when the canteen clattered onto the rocks, the last few drops of life-saving water seeping uselessly into the thirsty earth. The catastrophic loss triggered the final emotional intervention from Chloe. She didn't shout. She spoke with a quiet, devastating finality. "Stop. You just proved its point. We are destroying ourselves." Chloe stepped back, her eyes dull with despair, looking from one to the other. "This isn't just about water. It's about trust. You are acting exactly the way it wants. Ben, you're letting your fear make you irrational. Anya, you're letting your need for control blind you. This thing isn't some monster to be shot or analyzed. It's an experimenter testing the breaking point of our social bond. If we fail that test, if we collapse into hate, we deserve to be collected." The fight shattered their momentum, but Chloe's raw honesty forced a silent, necessary truce. They pushed on, driven by a terror now tempered by an understanding of the psychological stakes. They finally broke through the dense scrub and saw the fire tower, a skeletal, rusty spire reaching precariously above the trees, their last desperate hope. But the hope instantly died. The entire clearing surrounding the tower base was illuminated by a slow, methodical arrangement of the impossible indigo lights. They weren't moving. They formed a silent, glowing fence. Their exit was blocked. They stumbled into a nearby ruined concrete hunter's blind, a small, oppressive bunker, their final refuge, and listened to the sound of the silent, gliding entity beginning to circle their position. The hunter's blind was a small, oppressive concrete bunker, offering temporary cover but absolutely no possibility of escape. The air outside was thick with the strange electric hum, now focused and overwhelming. The conversation became desperate, yet focused, a final tactical debate where logic was discarded in favor of radical, unpredictable action. "It's got us," Ben whispered, pressing himself against the damp, cold wall. "It drove us here. This is the collection point." "No," Anya said, her voice shaking, but her eyes were fixed on the silvery sphere she still instinctively held. "We stopped running." Running failed. It knows the terrain. It knows our panic. We have to do something illogical, something it won't anticipate. They debated their final options, tossing out ideas born of terror and exhaustion, rejecting the rational for the intuitive. "I could try to use this thing as a weapon, a distraction," Anya said, holding up the alien sphere. "If I throw it, maybe the energy output will spike and stun it, or at least confuse it for a moment." "No, that's aggression. You'll only confirm its hypothesis that we are violent, destructive specimens," Ben argued, suddenly calm with the clarity of fatalism. "I've read too many accounts of first contact. The outcome is never determined by firepower, it's determined by intent. We have to communicate non-aggression. We have to show we're sapient, not just hostile prey." "Communicate how?" "We don't speak, click, hiss," Anya challenged, throwing her hands up in frustration. Chloe finally spoke, her voice calm and absolute, cutting through their fear. "Yes, we do. Not with our words, but with our language. We use the one thing we have in abundance: sound, rhythm, intent. It wants data. We give it data it hasn't anticipated. Cooperation." Anya slowly dropped the sphere into her lap, a symbolic, agonizing surrender of her scientific authority. Her final, best plan was now to trust an artist's intuition and a historian's study of folklore. Ben had overcome his paralyzing anxiety. With nothing left to lose, his intellectual core, his knowledge of human patterns, kicked in, providing the strategic framework for contact. Chloe moved toward the small, heavy metal hatch that served as the bunker's door. Anya and Ben exchanged a look of terror and acceptance. This was the end, one way or another. "If this is what breaks it, Chloe," Anya whispered, her hand going to her knife one last, unnecessary time. Then do it. Chloe nodded, her face utterly serene. She slowly, deliberately unlatched the heavy door and pushed it open just a crack, exposing them to the indigo-lit clearing. The air was silent, the entity waiting patiently outside, its form a tall, impossible outline. Then Chloe began to speak. She didn't use English or any human language. She used tonal shifts, vowel sounds, and rhythmic clicks of her tongue, attempting to mimic the patterns they had overheard in the cave, but infusing them with her own deep, desperate intention. She layered fear, curiosity, and a plea for acknowledgement, projecting raw, complicated emotion into the alien language of mathematics and silence. The clicks and hisses were imperfect, human, and messy, but they were a clear attempt at a negotiated stand. The figure, outlined in the indigo light, stopped moving instantly. It turned, slowly, toward the sound. The communication had begun. It was a long, terrifying minute of direct contact. The entity, drawn by Chloe's desperate, imperfect tonal monologue, slowly glided closer to the blind. The interaction was internal, a blend of sensory description and the friend's whispered, fearful reactions. Chloe kept up her rhythmic monologue, her eyes locked on the impossible figure outside the hatch. The air grew intensely, unnaturally cold, causing their breath to plume out in small clouds of vapor. "It's responding," Ben choked out, his eyes wide, glued to the light. "The light, it's pulsing with her rhythm. It's a conversation." Anya watched Chloe, her mind racing, analyzing the method of communication now that her fear was controlled by her analytical curiosity. "It's not language like we know it, it's data transfer. Chloe is sending emotional states and it's absorbing them. It's not listening to words, it's sampling complex data sets." She leaned forward and whispered, "Chloe, tell it we're leaving. Use a fast, rising tone. Project exit, not attack." Ben, watching the pulsing light, felt a wave of profound, suffocating wonder wash over his terror. This is it, the great discovery. We are not alone, and the price of that knowledge might be our extinction. I was right about the history, wrong about the hope. As Chloe continued to project complex emotional data, the figure paused its own response and, with a sudden, silent intensity, projected a wave of pure, coherent thought back at them. It was a terrifying, fleeting insight that struck all three of them simultaneously, like a cold hammer blow straight into their consciousness. The insight hit them. The entity was not a soldier, nor was it evil. It was an immensely powerful ancient naturalist. It wasn't trying to destroy the Earth. It was classifying its inhabitants. It viewed humans the way a scientist views a particularly interesting, complex sample in a petri dish. Their struggle, their fear, their unique emotional language. This was the fascinating data. The woods were not a hunting ground. They were a terrarium. And the time for observation was ending. "It's done," Chloe whispered, pulling back inside the hatch, slamming the concrete door shut with a heavy clang. She was shaking violently, tears running down her face, the emotional burden of the insight too great. "It knows everything. It understands our capacity for fear and love. It has the sample." "What did you see?" Anya demanded, gripping her by the shoulders. "The woods. They aren't hostile," Chloe said, staring blankly ahead. "They're a cage. And we just proved we're intelligent enough to be worthy of the collection. We are sentient, unique, and worth filing away." Outside, the strange clicks resumed, but this time they were receding. The pressure of the electric field dissipated. The entity had gathered what it came for. It began to retreat, leaving behind one final message. The indigo lights flickered one last time, forming a specific, rhythmic sequence that was distinctly not the language they had heard before. Ben suddenly gasped, his mind grasping for a pattern in the chaos. That pattern, it's not a language, it's an astronomical signature, a designation, a coordinate. He looked at his friends, eyes wide with the chilling truth. It's not leaving a threat, it's leaving a return address. They had been granted a reprieve, an acknowledgement, and a chilling promise of a future encounter. The immediate threat was gone. The clearing, now silent and returned to the gray light of morning, felt less like safety and more like a vacuum. They wasted no time. Anya opened the hatch and confirmed the clearing was empty. The indigo lights vanished. They ran, fueled by the adrenaline of the reprieve, sprinting not with desperation, but with a unified, determined focus toward the distant, unseen road. The air was sparse, focused entirely on pace and endurance. They pushed through the brush, grabbing each other for support, over roots and jagged terrain. Keep going, don't look back at the ridge. The terror now channeled into sheer physical effort, his fear of failure momentarily overcome by the need for survival. As they ran, the shift in their characters was finalized. Ben, finding a purpose beyond his own anxiety, focused entirely on the escape. Anya, finally understanding the futility of control and the danger of knowledge, paused only to hurl the cold, silvery sphere deep into the thick, dark swamp, rejecting the false security of science. Chloe led by intuition, sensing the brief, finite window of safety granted to them. They finally broke through the dense tree line and onto the barely used service road, collapsing onto the rough asphalt. They lay there for minutes, staring at the familiar, overcast sky, the sky that no longer felt safe or benevolent. They had witnessed something that changed everything they knew about the universe. A long, crucial moment of reckoning began. They saw it. They had to tell someone, right? The military, the scientists. They had a duty. Number. No one would believe them. They'd institutionalize them. 3 dehydrated campers hallucinate alien contact. They had no physical evidence. The only proof was gone. But it was real. They knew it was real. Chloe looked at both of them, her eyes aged years in 2 nights, holding a gaze of frightening maturity. It is real. And that is why they must never tell. Their silence is their only defense now. If they share this, humanity will either collapse into mass panic or, worse, try to replicate the contact. They'll try to fight it, and the only thing they learned is that this thing is indifferent, powerful, and will absolutely return for anything it finds interesting. They tell no one, ever. They reached a silent, profound agreement. Silence was their survival strategy. Their shared, terrifying secret was a new, unbreakable bond that transcended friendship. Minutes later, a beat-up pickup truck driven by a local deer hunter slowly rounded the corner. He stopped, looking at their ragged, muddy, wide-eyed figures with a casual, rural curiosity. "Lord Almighty, what happened to y'all?" "Rough camping trip, huh?" the hunter drawled, chewing slowly on a piece of gum. "Yeah," Anya replied, her voice steady and controlled for the first time since the night before. "Lost our way. And our supplies. Got turned around in the swamp. Well, hop in. I'll drop you at the highway. Y'all look like you've seen a ghost." They climbed into the truck bed, battered, thirsty, but alive. As the truck pulled away, leaving the silent, oppressive woods behind them, they didn't speak. They didn't touch. They were 3 people who had died and been reborn into a universe far colder and more complex than they had known. As they reached the pavement, Chloe leaned over the cab and looked back at the receding tree line, the vast green wall of the terrarium. She whispered, her voice too low for anyone but the reader to hear, the final chilling thought that defined their future. "It knows where we live now.